Through exclusive access to information filings, I now have the total amount the Alberta government blew on COVID advertising, but redactions are preventing me from showing you who the government paid all that money to. For the last 2 years, you could hardly go anywhere in Alberta without being completely inundated with COVID advertising, telling you to get your vaccine, telling you we're all in this together, to stay home, to stay safe, telling you where to stand or what to do if you're experiencing cold and flu-like symptoms. This stuff was everywhere, even billboards on the side of the highway. And every time I drove past one of those things, I thought to myself, boy, that sure looks expensive. And as it turns out, it was. Because through access to information filings, we now have the total expenditures by the Alberta government between March 1st, 2020 and May 31st, 2022 on COVID advertising. And we wanted the government to break down the spend by media outlet because a lot of failing mainstream media companies were getting these backdoor bailouts from governments in the form of payments to provide COVID advertising. Now, unlike these failing mainstream media companies who are getting all the bailouts from the governments to provide COVID advertising brainwashing, we don't take any money from the government. We do all these access to information filings out of pocket. Now, if you'd like to support our efforts to hold governments to account by asking for documents, please consider making a donation at rebelinvestigates.com. So first, I'm going to tell you what I can tell you. Then I'm going to tell you what I can't tell you. And then I'm going to tell you how we're going to try to get the rest of the information. We got back 6 pages from the Alberta government, and much of it is just preamble and explanation. According to the data, there was a total of $14,258,852 taxpayer dollars spent on just staying home to stay safe COVID-style advertising, and then another $785,000 and change dollars spent on trying to convince Albertans to get their vaccines, for a grand total of $16,340,170 taxpayer dollars spent on all forms of COVID advertising by the Alberta government over the course of 2 years. So that's the information I can tell you. Now, here's what I can't. I can show you the sorts of advertising the government bought, but I can't show you the companies the government contracted with. I can show you that the government bought banners and postcards and media and flyers, but I can't tell you who provided those services. That's all blacked out and redacted, and the government cites Section 25(1)B of the Information Law. Now, here's what that section reads. The head of a public body may refuse to disclose information to an applicant if the disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the economic interest of a public body or the government of Alberta, or the ability of the government to manage the economy, including the following information: the financial, commercial, scientific, technical, or other information in which a public body or the government of Alberta has a proprietary interest or right to use, and that is reasonably likely to have monetary value. What they're saying here is if they disclose the information, who got the money, it's going to harm the financial interests of the Alberta government. That makes absolutely no sense. How does telling me how much money the government spent with, for example, Global News, harm any interest in the Alberta government, except for, I guess, their reputation? It in no way harms the financial interest of the government. They just don't want to tell me who their favorite media players were in all of this. Now, we are appealing these redactions because this is outrageous. Alberta taxpayers have a right to know who got favorable contracts from the Alberta government for COVID messaging. Now, these appeals are time-consuming, and sometimes, frankly, they can take a year, maybe even years. But we're not going to stop until we get the answers. Albertans deserve them. If you'd like to help us fund our research costs for this, but for other filings too, please consider making a donation at rebelinvestigates.com. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn-Reid. Over the course of 2 years, we know the Alberta government spent in excess of $16 million on COVID advertising, but they refused to tell us who they had those contracts with. But we are going to find out. To fund our research appeal, please consider making a donation at rebelinvestigates.com.